Lately, it seems like the world is getting stranger and weirder. Recently, a parade in Toulouse, France, brought with it something that many would never expect to see so openly. A spectacle full of esoteric symbolism and demonic figures, something that looked more like a portal opening into darkness. This event, supported even by local authorities, was a real shock for all those who still value sacred symbols and respect for spirituality. Europe, once the birthplace of Christianity, now seems to be embracing something very different, something dark. Let's understand together what is really happening. Desecration of Christian symbols. It seems that we are living in times when the very essence of Christian values is being called into question in a way that is almost unbelievable. Recently, during a parade in France, we saw esoteric figures parade as if they were mocking Christianity. Imagine seeing sacred symbols, those that evoke faith and hope, being transformed into grotesque caricatures, almost like a bad joke. It's not just a question of criticism or artistic freedom, it's something deeper. It's an attack on what is sacred to many. Anyone who witnesses scenes like these cannot avoid the feeling that there is something bigger happening, something that is not simply art. What is at stake here is our own understanding of respect for other people's values. It's not about accepting differences, but rather about the question of how to symbolize them. In that parade, esoteric figures appeared carrying symbols that made a point of inverting the meaning of Christian symbols. A cross, which has always been a sign of redemption and sacrifice, is now being used to represent something dark. This raises important questions. How far does freedom of expression go, and where does deliberate offense begin? What is the heart of those who watch their faith being used as a tool of mockery? The truth is that this is not an isolated event. We are talking about a growing trend in Europe, in which there seems to be a real search for the deconstruction of Christian values. It is scenes like these, repeated frequently, that make people start to question themselves. How far are we willing to passively watch the desecration of what is sacred? It is the attempt to transform what is pure into something corrupt, to give what is sublime a tone of mockery. If we don't pay attention, we will end up normalizing these situations, and the biggest danger is when absurdity becomes commonplace. Some people might think, well, it's just a parade, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is how the process of trivializing what should be inviolable begins. We start by accepting small things, small misrepresentations, until suddenly the value of that symbol is completely lost. A clear example of this is how, over the years, several symbols have lost their original meaning and become mere decorative props. The cross, the anchor of Christian hope, begins to be seen no longer as an emblem of faith, but as a kind of empty ornament. And it's not just about personal faith, it's about the culture of a civilization that is being disfigured before our eyes. Actions like these at public events have the power to shape perceptions and change the way future generations will see these symbols. Think about it. A child who grows up seeing figures like these at commemorative events will hardly be able to associate these symbols with their true meaning. It's like a process of collective desensitization, and what's most worrying is that this isn't happening by chance. Perhaps this is the true objective, to take away the power that these symbols have, disconnect people from authentic spirituality, and make room for a new order of values. And make no mistake, this is just beginning. What we witnessed in that parade is just the tip of the iceberg, an indication of a transformation that is being silently imposed. And speaking of transformations, have you noticed the cultural changes that are taking place across Europe? It seems that with each passing day, the churches that once represented the heart of cities are disappearing. Alarming statistics in Europe, it is no exaggeration to say that Europe is undergoing an unprecedented cultural transformation. Every 30 days, a new historic church closes its doors. These churches, which for centuries were symbols of unity and spirituality, are becoming ruins of the past. Meanwhile, the number of Islamic mosques grows, filling the space previously occupied by Christian temples. This is not only a religious change, but also a cultural one. Each church that closes is a piece of cultural heritage that is lost. And this is not a natural movement, but a transition that seems orchestrated in a way that completely changes the European spiritual landscape. With each church that closes, the feeling is that we are losing part of our history. Europe, which has always been seen as the cradle of Christianity, now finds itself at a time of profound transformation. In many cities, the sound of church bells no longer echoes, replaced by calls to prayer from mosques that rise on the same ground. The question is not about the presence of Islam, but about the disappearance of Christianity. What is happening is not simply a peaceful coexistence of religions, but rather a true erasure of one of the continent's main expressions of faith. For those observing from the outside, it may be difficult to perceive the magnitude of this transformation. But think of a city like Toulouse, for example. Once full of churches that dotted the horizon, it is now increasingly marked by structures that symbolize a different faith. This wouldn't be a problem if there wasn't a deliberate deconstruction of Christian values. This change does not happen in isolation. It is accompanied by a wave of secularization and a growing rejection of Christian symbols. It seems that there is an attempt to rewrite Europe's spiritual identity, and it is happening right before our eyes without many realizing it. The change is also visible in people's behavior. That connection with spirituality, which was so common, is becoming rare. Each church that closes represents more than one less building. It represents a meeting point that disappears, an opportunity for reflection and spiritual search that disappears. And while this happens, new spaces with new messages take their place. And it is in this context that we need to ask ourselves, what is being offered in place of Christianity? What is the new message being propagated? Are we moving towards a truly inclusive society, or are we simply exchanging one set of values for another, without even questioning the consequences? And the most curious thing is that, while churches become museums or are simply demolished, mosques find more and more support to be built. There is an almost palpable incentive for this transformation to happen. This leads us to reflect, what is the true objective behind this change? Why are we witnessing such rapid and drastic change? For those who believe in prophecies, it may seem that we are seeing the preparation for something greater, a change that may be linked to events that many have predicted long ago. But even for those who don't believe, it's impossible not to notice that something significant is happening. Some say that this is just part of the natural evolution of society, but is that really so? Or are we allowing an important aspect of our culture to be erased without any resistance? The loss of these churches is a loss for everyone, not just Christians. It is the loss of a rich history, of a tradition that helped shape the values that we still consider important today. And if we don't do something to preserve these symbols, soon there will be nothing left but vague memories of what was once the spiritual soul of Europe. And speaking of symbols and changes, have you heard about what happened in Toulouse recently? An event that left many perplexed. Portal of Darkness in Toulouse? It's not every day that we see events like what recently happened in Toulouse. Imagine an entire city becoming the scene of what many considered a portal opening into darkness. Local authorities, who were supposed to represent order and security for the population, supported an event that clearly featured demonic and esoteric figures, something that goes beyond entertainment. It was as if, for a moment, the city had surrendered to a spectacle of dark symbolism, a celebration of the occult, which left many residents restless and apprehensive. What was seen in Toulouse was more than an artistic event, it was a true display of symbols and figures that directly refer to mysticism and the occult. Demonic figures, dressed to represent underworld entities, paraded as if celebrating something beyond our understanding. It is interesting to note how these demonstrations have found support in certain spheres of society, almost as if there was a hidden intention to make them more acceptable, or even normal, for the general public. But why so much effort to normalize the darkest things? The point is that we are not just talking about a local event, but a global trend. Toulouse, in this context, becomes just another example of a series of manifestations that have emerged in various parts of the world, where the esoteric and the demonic are highlighted. The idea of a portal opening is not just a metaphor. For many, what happened there was the symbolic representation of a transition, of a spiritual change that is underway. Something that, for those who are more attentive, may indicate that we are entering a new era, where old values are being replaced by something completely different. And that's where the danger lies. When events like this begin to happen more frequently and become accepted as part of popular culture, we are, in effect, giving up a series of spiritual and cultural protections that have been built over centuries. For those who believe in the prophecies, it may seem that we are seeing the preparation of the way for the Antichrist, a figure who, according to biblical texts, would come in a time of great confusion and darkness. What happened in Toulouse cannot be seen in isolation, but as part of a large puzzle that is being assembled before our eyes. The support of local authorities for an event like this also raises many questions. To what extent are these authorities aware of what they are encouraging? Do they understand the symbolic weight of these demonstrations? Or are they simply seeing it as another tourist attraction? The problem is that by supporting events that clearly exalt figures and concepts linked to the occult, they are, even if without realizing it, legitimizing something that has the potential to destabilize society's spirituality. And what happens when the spiritual pillars of a community are shaken? What we saw in Toulouse was a celebration of the darkest things, and that should serve as a warning. It's not about banning or censoring cultural manifestations, but about understanding what is being propagated and what the consequences of this are in the long term. We are at a time when symbols matter, and what we choose to celebrate says a lot about the type of society we are becoming. If we continue on this path, it is possible that events like this will become increasingly common. And what surprises us today may be seen as normal tomorrow. So, have you ever thought about how this could impact the next generations? And it is exactly in this context that the role of the mythological and demonic figures that were displayed with so much emphasis in this event comes into play. Lilith statues. Conclusion: we have reached the end of this dive into the signs of the times, into a Europe facing a profound cultural transformation, and into events like the one in Toulouse that seemed to pave the way for dark forces. What we saw here isn't just about demonic figures or provocative parades. It's about spiritual disconnection, about how values are being challenged and often desecrated. If all this has caused you concern, know that you are not alone. It is a sign that there is still light within you, that the search for truth and what is sacred still pulses.